Today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
And I continue to share positive stories that allow people to see what's possible. A lot of times people say, if you don't see it, you can't be it. I really want to continue to prove that no matter what your disability is, you can achieve anything, and there are people out there doing it.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Becky Curran. Becky serves as the Disability Equality Index Director at Disability In. In her current role, she's responsible for managing the overall DEI program. Becky started her career in the entertainment industry, then after several years launched a public speaking business. A prolific public speaker and advocate for disability inclusion on a global scale, she's spoken at over 100 venues, including schools, corporations, nonprofit organizations, and government agencies throughout the United States and Kenya. She's really passionate about disability inclusion in schools, the workplace, and everywhere else. More recently, she spent 3.5 years working in the Equal Employment Opportunity and Diversity Department at Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, also known as SAG-AFTRA, the world's largest entertainment union. At SAG-AFTRA, she supported the implementation of a national diversity plan of action to achieve accurate representation of those groups historically excluded from the entertainment and news media. Becky, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here today. So I first saw you speak a couple months ago at the Mogul X conference in New York City, and you really shared your story starting from your earliest years and how your life experience influenced your career. And I'd love to have my listeners learn more about that story. So maybe we can start at the beginning. Maybe tell me a little bit about growing up and how your early life experiences influenced your career.
Happy to. Just so everyone on the podcast knows, I am a little person, so I stand at 4 feet tall, and there are only 30,000 little people in the United States, and 80% of little people are born to average-height parents. When I was first born, I was born to average-height parents. They had never met a little person before. The only perception they had of little people was in the media, and my parents were a little scared when I first was delivered at the hospital. The doctors weren't sure if I was going to make it through the night. I was struggling with breathing. And there was a doctor on site who knew about little people, had seen one other little person get delivered before, and they were able to diagnose me on the spot as having achondroplastic dwarfism. And that's the most common type of dwarfism. A lot of people with other types of dwarfism, there are over 400 types of dwarfism. And some of those people aren't diagnosed till a few years later. Some people are still waiting for diagnosis at 9, 10, 11, 20 years old. Wow. I was fortunate to have them figure out the diagnosis. And of course, that journey wasn't over after that. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. It took about 6 months for my parents to find a specialist who really knew about little people. It's similar to any profession that someone hesitates to go into because the audience isn't that large. If there are only 30,000 little people in the U.S.,
right,
not every little person may be able to afford to go to Baltimore, Maryland, to where they found this doctor, or they may not even be able to get into his clinic because he was one person. They were fortunate to sign up for a sleep study that allowed us to get into that practice. We were able to see him after I took the sleep study, and he had a full waiting room of people, and my parents were terrified on their face because they just didn't really know what the future has in store. My mom will tell everyone that she had no worry in the world, and my dad was the one terrified, but they were both nervous because they just really wanted to raise a child to be independent and lead a fulfilling life, and they just weren't sure where the answers were.
Sure.
The doctor saw the look on my dad's face, even with a full waiting room. He brought my parents in and allowed them to just let him know everything on their mind. And then he was able to remind them that I was going to be okay. And I could rely on him as a doctor. And we would continue to go there twice a year, depending on what the need was, once a year as I started to get older. And he ended up performing some surgeries on me. It kind of comes with being a little person. A lot of people end up having surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
I had narrow ear canals and continued to have narrow ear canals. But when I was younger, I had tubes in and out of my ears. I had tonsils and adenoids out. And those, I would say, are more common surgeries because other people have had those as well, whether or not they have dwarfism. But when I was 3 years old, I had bone taken out of my legs because I was bow-legged. And it just could have affected the alignment of my whole body as I was learning how to walk.
Sure.
And then when I was 13, I had bone taken out of my pelvis and put back in my legs. And a major surgery that I had when I was 15 that doctor wasn't even able to perform was I started falling and I pretty much lost my ability to walk.
Wow.
And I needed to get surgery for spinal cord compression to release the pressure off of my spine, which could ultimately paralyze me, or it could allow me to have the ability to walk again.
Wow.
And I was fortunate to have the latter of being able to learn to walk again. I was stressed out because I didn't want to fall back in school. That same doctor we went to at 6 months told my parents at that same time, try to keep her in the same school system just because of social exclusion that continues to happen today.
Mm-hmm.
If she's in the same grade with a lot of her friends, she will be more likely to still have those friends throughout and not have to worry about as much bullying. And then my parents also strategically worked with one of my childhood friends' parents to see if she could be in my class from preschool to 7th grade. And it really prevented any type of bullying that I at least noticed. I know I'm hard of hearing a little bit in my right ear from one of my surgeries, but I really don't remember being bullied at all throughout school, which I'm fortunate about, but it baffles me that continues to happen in schools today. But social exclusion did start to happen. I had my back surgery. I missed 29 days of school. I was devastated because I thought that I was going to fall back in my grade. And I ended up seeing if I could keep with my grade, even though I had gone to school with the people a year below me and a year above me. I still wanted to stay with my grade because those were the people I knew the most.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great support system of the whole community throughout my surgery. And then as I was recovering, got through that summer. This had happened in the fall of my sophomore year. Got through the summer. And then after we went back to school, my friends started liking guys going into our junior year.
Mm.
And of course, just everyone wants to explore and see what dating's like and just have big crushes. But they didn't think that I could be around. So I started feeling exclusion in that way. I was not invited out places. I was at home with my parents a lot. Of course, at that age, I didn't want to be home with my parents.
Right.
I always look back thinking we could have had so much more fun if I just embraced it and made the most of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it took most of my junior year for me to feel really down and left out and not fitting in. I was still participating. I participated in sports among my average height peers throughout my childhood. Played soccer, sailing, skiing, swimming. I was on the high school swim team. But the surgery also had some setbacks and I wasn't able to compete as well. But I was able to get back on the youth soccer field and the local swim team club. And I had the support of everyone. But I still didn't have enough activities to keep me engaged and distracted from being left out.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got into senior year, everyone was starting to get ready to go to college and getting excited about that, knowing that we'd all end up leaving each other for different places. And people started being a little bit more welcoming, but it was still hard for me to let go of that stage. But I really did learn a lot because junior year, I also went on a trip where none of my close friends were planning to go. And the school had made it clear that it's okay if you don't have close friends coming on this trip. It actually could be a benefit because you can meet new people. And it was organized through the school. It was Munich and Paris. I took French in school because I just was dying to go to France.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only reason. And now I wish I took Spanish because I've been in so many more environments where Spanish could be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to go on this trip. My parents supported me going on this trip. And I was excluded even on the trip around the people who were running it. Of course, there were some common events planned. We had plans for dinner at the Eiffel Tower and other places, but there was a lot of free time too. And I had to figure out what I was going to do during that free time since I was being excluded, since no one really wanted to welcome me into their group. And I struggled a little bit with the thought of, oh, maybe they just think I'm too slow. I don't know why they think I'm an inconvenience. And I called home crying because I really wanted to see France. And it was a tough way to be able to see it. And I think really as I dive deeper into this experience and this stage of my life, I think about all that has come from it. I am totally fine going to the movies by myself, going to dinner by myself, just going out and exploring as much as I can. So I'm not missing out or waiting around for other people to accept the fact that I'm present and them being comfortable with it or having to justify why people are uncomfortable with me being in the room, even just because of my physical appearance. And it's crazy to think that people would react in that way in this day and age. But I really think the media affects how people portray people with dwarfism because there are so few of us. And the millions of people who live in this country perceive us based on how they see us in the media. If someone sees me in a positive light, they're going to treat me with respect, and they may invite me on a trip or want me to spend more time around. If someone sees us in a negative light, then they're going to end up treating us with fear. Even when I go to the grocery store or the store and you see a parent with the child who's really curious, I always want the child to be able to feel comfortable enough to come up and ask a question. But sometimes parents end up pulling their children away, and that then continues to escalate the fear feeling that people have for no real apparent reason.
Oh, yeah. And I know you had mentioned that in your talk as well, is that you were always very open to answering questions for anyone who's curious. And I was wondering if that ever gets exhausting, because I could just imagine people coming up to you multiple times a day. And I'm wondering if there's ever just a day where it's like, oh, I just want to be like out and about. Or do you ever get tired of people asking you questions?
In Lyft and Uber rides and on airplanes. Those are the times I want to be off. But, or I guess in a taxi. It's just, I want to get from point A to point B. But other than that, I really don't think any time's off limits. I really enjoy being able to help educate people because I know there are so many people behind me who aren't as comfortable doing it. I did have a parent who reached out to me during a speech. I think it was at one of the business networking clubs. When I first started my speaking career, I, of course, had to do a lot of practice speeches at Rotary clubs and business networking clubs. And this lady said to me that she was about to marry into a family with 4 boys. And then she asked, when I'm out with them in public, what if we see another little person and they're not as approachable? And I just got so frustrated because I said, how are you going to know if that person's approachable if you don't just try approaching them and ask them, how's your day? Or just a general question to start the conversation. And if they seem a little standoffish, you can just say, have a nice day and walk away. But if you don't take that chance and ask them a question, it still is showing the behavior of fear. And none of us are going to learn continuing to have those feelings.
Yeah, it's a great point.
And I just can't speak on behalf of every single person and how they're going to react because I am very appreciative of the upbringing I had and the outgoingness that my family instilled in me. And there could be people next to me who don't feel that way and aren't as willing to do that. But that's okay too. But you don't know until you try.
Right. And everyone's different. Everyone's an individual. So it's just like talking with anyone that you don't know, out in public.
Right.
Absolutely. You mentioned a lot that people's perceptions of little people are shaped by what they see in the media. So I can see the connection as to why you would have had that interest in entertainment and media. Did you have aspirations to go into entertainment when you were in college? Did you study along those lines, or how did that part of your career take shape?
I ended up applying to 9 colleges, and I decided to go to Providence College. And the reason I ended up going to Providence College was when I was on a tour, there was a little person in the cafeteria, and I really enjoyed seeing another little person on campus because that means that whole campus had been exposed to another little person. And it was just a relief that I wouldn't have to explain myself maybe to as many professors or students. Of course, you can't cover for everyone,
right.
But it at least allowed me to know that there was that social acceptance already at the school. I was a marketing major. I really just was intrigued by marketing in general. It was a liberal arts college, so a lot of the first 2 years were liberal arts focused, and then you got to start working on your marketing specific courses. And I ended up interning my first year of college at a fire insurance company only because we had a neighbor who was able to set me up with that internship, and it was in accounting. And I learned very quickly that accounting was not what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Then my sophomore year, I ended up interning at iRobot, where they make the robotic vacuums, the consumer vacuums, and also robots that go out on the battlefields and basically replace humans so they can watch for some of the bombs that may be coming at them.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot from that experience. I thought it was really cool. They even had some chances where we could read some TV and movie scripts to figure out where the robotic vacuum may fit in for product placement. I know it was on the show Friends and maybe Seinfeld and Sex and the City. They were able to do some product integration. And I just kind of got a little taste of entertainment just by reading those scripts. And then iRobot, the movie, came out that year. We were able to go to see the movie because I think there was something where the spelling of the movie was the same as the company, but the movie producers had purchased the rights from the trademark book or something where it allowed both entities to be okay with whatever was going on. But in return, we were offered tickets to go see the movie.
Cool.
That was a little bit of exposure. And then going into my next year, I was looking for a job that was going to, or an internship that was going to hopefully lead to something more after my senior year of college. And what I ended up doing is I just pulled out a newspaper listing that had about 120 ad agencies in Boston. My parents lived in Boston, 12 miles south in Weymouth, and that's where I would be based for the summer. Mm-hmm. And the one ad agency that responded to me was one called Allied. It's now called Allied Integrated Marketing, but I think it was called Allied Advertising at the time. And they work directly with the movie studios, and they write notes at movie screenings to figure out, this is before the movies get released. So you figure out how the audience, the target audience, reacts, and then you send those notes to the studio to see if they need to make any more tweaks to the film before going for a wider release. And we would be in charge of finding that target audience to send to the movie in this advanced screening. If it was Happy Feet, you'd find a lot of families. You'd go to the aquarium, kind of offer a deal there, just offer tickets, all different types of movies. We worked with all the different studios. And I really enjoyed going in and just kind of sitting in the dark theater, writing down what people would react to. Mm. And then I realized just how much power the whole industry has when people were asked. This was at the Providence Place Mall where I had some of the screenings, because it went into my senior year where I was able to cover screenings in Providence. And it was the third story of the mall where the movie theater was, but the parking garage was under, so it was starting below the first floor. And people were not allowed to bring their cell phones. It was kind of around the time of flip phones. Mm-hmm. And some people would, and we were just worried about people trying to record on the screen because it was an advanced screening. And anyone who had their phone had to go back downstairs before they could come back up to the movie to get rid of their cell phone. Wow. And just kind of that whole power that you can really get people to listen because they really want to see this movie. It was just fascinating. And just the people who would line up before the film, and we had to wait until we got the actual film into the movie theater and then back out. Now it's probably all just done through email and they send the digital version. But it was just, I was like, wow, this industry really influences people.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting an internship. I was still covering some screenings. Basically how the internship was set up was in Boston during the summer after my junior year. I would go into Boston 2 days a week, and those 2 days wouldn't be paid. But then if I would cover screenings, it was like $35 a screening. And then when I got to Providence, I didn't go into the office because I was going back to school, but I was able to just do those one-offs where I went to the movie theater and was able to get paid for each time I would do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I still was trying to find an additional internship just to look for more opportunities. And I ended up at the NBC affiliate in Providence in the publicity and promotions department. And that ended up leading to a connection with the local casting director. She had her own casting business, and they were filming the movie Underdog with Peter Dinklage that summer.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked me if I could be a stand-in for him. So a stand-in goes into the set and basically stands there while the producers and directors and writers set up the scene and making sure the lighting's all right. And then Peter can come in right when they're ready to start filming.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that ended up conflicting with my last 2 weeks of college, and I needed to graduate college because we know how important that is.
Yes, yeah, true.
But during that process, because I got to know the casting director, I asked her, I said, I know this isn't going to work out and you have to find a replacement, but do you want help with casting? Because I would love to learn about casting. And she offered to allow me to come be on her team for the summer, another unpaid internship. I only bring this up just because it's putting in your due diligence before you get those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I would call up to 300 extras a day to show up on set. It would be a big crowd scene, and people would be like changing life-threatening doctor's appointments just so they could come to set and be in a movie.
Wow.
I just thought that was crazy.
Yeah.
But part of me wanted to tell them, go to your doctor. I'd rather you stay alive.
Right.
But especially in cities outside of New York and LA, where it's not as common and not as often where they are filming a big film, this was an opportunity for these people to get their moment of fame. And it made my job easier as I was recruiting 300 extras a day because I didn't have to make many more calls than 300. And I did that for the summer. During this time, I had also joined the Little People of America community. I decided growing up that I really didn't need to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got to college, especially after my freshman year, I was asked by this family that my parents knew if I was going to the convention in Boston that year in 2003. And I took a lot of time to think about it, but I really thought that that would help fill the void of some of the social exclusion I was feeling since 11th grade. And it really did. It was overwhelming when I first attended. It's a week-long conference. I kind of broke it up into pieces. Like I would go one day and then I would hang out with some friends from home. I think we even went to a concert another day, or later that night. I went to lunch with someone from college. I tried to not dive in too much because I just was hesitant. I just wanted to figure out if I was going to enjoy being around other people like me, which seems like a no-brainer, but it was overwhelming when all of these people had been involved for a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
They already had their group of friends. I had a family friend who was actually chasing a girl as soon as we got there, who he had his agenda.
Yeah.
But immediately, right when I got to the conference, he introduced me to his friends. And it was a strong, tight-knit of people from California who they all happened to live in California. And I just became close friends with them. And that actually ended up influencing some of my decisions to move to LA after I did that casting work. I had a friend, Mikey, who was an actor. He and I didn't meet until the next year at the conference in San Francisco. And Boston was also his first conference. He was originally from Atlanta, Georgia. He ended up moving out to Los Angeles in 2005. He had studied acting in school. He actually was a foot shorter than I am. And I just was amazed just on how his persona and how he just showed up everywhere in life, no matter where he was, and how people may have treated him even worse than how people treated me sometimes, just because people sometimes look for the quote unquote most norm of the abnorms. And he and I just became good friends. And he said that he had a talent manager who was looking for someone to work with her. And I said, I'd love to come out and learn about that part of the business. And she also happened to be a little person. By the time I was able to get out to LA, she had already flaked, but I got to LA. Oh. And it's like, okay, so I got here because my parents said, you need to have a job and a place to stay.
Yeah.
And then we'll support you. And I had friends that I was going to stay with. Mm-hmm. And then I got this job, and there was really like no turning back, where I did everything they said I should do. So we got out there. They hadn't even left yet. They spent about a week with me to get settled. And once we got out there, we saw my friend Mikey. He ended up telling me at this dinner that I probably wasn't going to hear from this lady. And I took it as a basically fire under the butt to figure out how to stay out there. Fortunately, I had some money saved up from my graduation, and I ended up sending out about 1,000 resumes, went on 100 interviews over a 4-month period, still didn't find a job. Mm-hmm. Every time I walked in the door, I was judged based on my appearance, but I still had a passion for getting into this industry because I knew how much influence it had. I ended up going through some temporary placement agencies, and they helped place me at some odd jobs at first. I worked at this place called Trailer Park for 2 days. They make movie trailers for films. I worked at the Hallmark Channel for a month. There was a guy on paternity leave in the marketing department. Then it got to be Christmas time, and my parents asked, are you coming home for the holidays? Mm-hmm. And during this time, it felt a little tense just because they were wondering, when are you going to get this job? Right. And they were equally as frustrated. Of course, they knew everything that was going on, but it just kept seeming like maybe it's time to come home and find a different route. And I made them promise me that even though I came home for Christmas, I still had a chance to go back to LA. And they said, don't worry, you can go back to LA. And while I was home, I started getting some more calls from the temporary placement agency. And they started telling me about an opportunity at Creative Artists Agency, which is one of the world's largest sports and entertainment agencies. That position ended up, I think it was the middle of January, when I was able to start there as a temporary employee. Mm-hmm. And I worked for someone who works in Hispanic marketing. And this was a time where the Spanish would have been helpful.
Yeah, just thinking about that.
I worked for her for about a month, and then people started saying, we need to figure out where else to shift you off to, because obviously Spanish isn't a specialty, and a lot of times our clients are calling. And I was fortunate to get the support of having someone kind of be the first assistant who knew Spanish, and then I could learn everything possible from her as the second assistant. They were pretty much ready to let me go after the month. The HR department said, your term's up. But I had a voice to this lady, and I think she had a liking to me, especially because she worked in the diversity space. She identified as a Latina. She had seen people struggle to get work. And she really wanted to make sure that I could find my place after working that hard to even get in the door. And when I was able to get the go-ahead to stay, it took another few months, and a position in entertainment marketing opened up. What happens is agents become agents because they go through this training program. You start off as an assistant or a coordinator, then you have to go back to the mailroom, and it's your experience where you can learn everything about the industry, deliver packages to high-profile people's houses, get to know the names in town. And it's just an intense training program. Once you get taken out of the mailroom, you have to be an agent for at least 6 months, I think, before you can get an assistant. Oh. So there was someone who had been an agent for 6 months, and she was able to get an assistant. So I shifted to her desk, working on different corporations who wanted to get that connection to entertainment because they knew that it was so powerful. Coca-Cola and the award shows, Harley Davidson, they wanted to get more celebrities to ride Harleys. Moet, Hennessy, Champagne, they wanted to get more integration in films. And it was similar to when I was reading scripts at iRobot. What we were doing was trying to figure out moments that we can integrate the products rather than just saying to a movie set, here, take this 6-pack of Coke and put it wherever you want in the film. Right. We were trying to have more control over where they could put stuff in the film. And this was fascinating to me, and I really enjoyed it. And I did that for about 2 years. It took 7 months till I was a permanent employee, and it took having another boss. Once I had 2 bosses, they could justify hiring me as a full-time employee after saying many times that there were hiring freezes, even though I saw many people get hired. But I just kept going through.
Wow.
And there were shifts in the marketing department. I ended up getting shifted around, had a bunch of different bosses. And I ultimately ended up moving up to the music department because one of my bosses, he was the second boss I got that allowed me to get hired on full time. He wanted to protect my job because he knew how hard I had worked. And he brought me up to the music department where he had come from. And he said to me he was planning on leaving eventually, but he wanted my job to be safe. But he wanted me to kind of explore to see what else was out there. This was about 2.5 years in. I ended up finding out about this comedy club coverage group where it felt similar to when I was at the ad agency, where any assistant who wanted to get involved could go out to comedy shows and write notes and send them to the comedy department, because all of the comedy agents weren't able to be at every show around town since there are so many shows going on every day of the week, similar to New York. And I would write notes, very thorough notes, and send them to the agents. And once a position became available in their department, I was asked to take that position. And I was fortunate that there was an opportunity because I knew that boss was going to be leaving soon. And once I was able to do that, I found out my boss was pregnant. And I was just, it was fine. I wanted everyone to have a family, but I was really craving that nurturing, mentoring type opportunity. And she had kind of checked out at the time. And I wasn't really sure how I was going to learn, but I just kept going out to as many comedy shows as possible to gain an eye for talent. Then when she went on maternity leave, I pretty much was doing her job for 3 months, booking comedy around the country and the world, different comedy festivals, different improv clubs, casinos, basically anyone who wanted to have access to our roster of clients. We would set up the contracts and make sure they were getting paid fairly and make sure it was something they wanted to do. And I did that for 2 years. And through kind of scouting, I met people and networked. And someone at CBS television studios had asked me if I wanted to come work there. And as I was starting to discover what I was passionate about and why I enjoyed the industry so much, I was able to figure out that maybe casting would be the place to go because I could affect how people are cast and how people are portrayed through that casting process. And some people had told me as I was asking for advice that that may be a good avenue. And even at the agency, there were some higher ups that were starting to ask me, what is it you're passionate about, since I had been there for so long? And I was starting to be able to express what I was passionate about. But it took until then for me to be able to do that because I was really working hard to just prove myself and get my foot in the door in the industry. And I think a lot of people just want to figure out all the answers right away. And I knew that if I tried to do that, that the journey would be a lot different. Once I gained the respect, I was able to share what I was passionate about. I was able to use the space at CAA to host a panel discussion that had actors and writers and producers who have disabilities, whether invisible or physical. And they were able to share a conversation about the importance of disability inclusion in the media. And through that, I was able to start a Facebook and Twitter page, Disability in Media. And I continue to share positive stories that allow people to see what's possible. A lot of times people say, if you don't see it, you can't be it. I really want to continue to prove that no matter what your disability is, you can achieve anything. And there are people out there doing it. And I was fortunate to have that conversation. I was sad that not many people from the agency itself were in attendance, but I was hoping that it could at least set the tone that that was a venue where the conversation was had. And then I continued building relationships throughout the industry with people who have disabilities, who are passionate about working in this space because they know the influence. And I continued to build those relationships and scout for talent and advocate for actors with disabilities in my next job at CBS. I ended up staying there about a year and just really wasn't what I was thinking it was going to be because there's still a lot of a disconnect between the casting directors and writers and producers. People aren't as willing to think outside the box, even if it says, or they say, think outside the box. If it's just a white actor with glasses, they'll try to find that exact person.
Right.
And it continues to happen. And I got frustrated. And just the environment itself wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. Through that, I ended up moving back to Boston. And it was a really tough decision because I had worked so hard to get into that industry that has such an influence on society's perceptions. I really didn't know what was going to happen next and if I was just giving up my dream of trying to change these perceptions. I moved back to Boston. I found out that my roommate at the time, the person who was the actor who brought me out to LA, was diagnosed with ALS. He was no longer going to be able to stay in LA. He was going to have to move back to Georgia. I was trying to decide, do I move back to LA after I take some time off, or do I just start a new chapter? About 2 months to decide before I went to get all my stuff in LA. And I figured that I needed to get at the same goals, but in a different way. Mm-hmm. And through that, I discovered that personal touch can have a big influence. My sister is a creative writing teacher, or was at the time, and she asked me if I could come meet her students. I was like, sure, I'll come meet them, but I didn't want it to feel like a waste of time.
Right.
Of course, it wasn't going to be for them because they were excited to meet me, but I really wanted to figure out, how can I turn this into something? Maybe I should share my story with them. And then I started building my speeches and sharing my story with others. It took me a little bit to accept the fact that I wasn't at the quote unquote level of success that I thought I needed to be in order for people to want to hear my story. Mm-hmm. But once people started telling me that parts of my story resonated with them, it didn't matter. And I reached out to Rotary clubs, business networking clubs, a lot of it unpaid speeches. But it was an opportunity for me to start building my speaking portfolio. I would try to ask places, if you're not able to pay, could you do video? And then I could at least have that as a marketing tool going forward. And I continued to try to figure out how I could get into more schools. I went to a parents' meeting at a Little People event, and a lot of the parents were talking about their children getting bullied, especially when they're having a transition from elementary to middle school, where 4 elementaries come together to go to that middle school. They know a fourth of the middle school, but not the rest of the people.
Right.
And there's that fear factor. I would go in and I would talk to the administrators to make sure they're thinking about the different accommodations, the requests that may come up. And I specifically said that they need to make sure the student can ask for those requests and don't just start making all these accommodations that may not make sense. And then I would speak to the whole student body. And I continued to do this, but I'm just kind of saying how I started out, speaking to the whole student body, sharing my story and telling them no questions off limits. Let me know your questions, in order to kind of protect that person who may not be as comfortable answering those questions because they're just trying to fit in. Mm-hmm. And then I continued to do that at schools. And I was asked to go to Kenya to speak at the launch of a Little People organization there. I found out about 24 hours before the trip that it was confirmed, but I still didn't really have anything that was holding me back. And I knew it would be a great experience. I was fortunate to go to all the different radio and TV stations there to spread awareness about dwarfism. There are a lot of parents there who hide their children because they're just so fearful of how the world's going to react. We had a celebration where about 500 people came, and it was great just to see everyone out of their houses and dancing. They love to dance. Mm-hmm. And through that experience, I just grew so much more appreciation just for the simple things in life. And when I got back from Kenya, I heard from someone who I had met at the panel discussion in Los Angeles, and he was working at SAG-AFTRA in the diversity department. He asked me if I wanted to consider applying to work for him. And he said the position was open in New York and LA. They were looking to hire 2 people for the team. And I knew that I wasn't ready to go back to LA, but I thought, okay, maybe I'll try for New York. And I ended up getting the position. It took about 5 months for it all to play out. But I moved to New York, and my parents were on a trip to Hawaii. And they said, "You're giving up your speaking career?" I said, "No, just going to be complementing it," because I was able to make it verbal at that point. I could be vocal about it, saying, "This is important. I'm going to continue speaking, and hopefully you can support that because that affects my decision to be able to come work there."
Sure.
And I got that support. But of course, I didn't abuse it. I made sure I had vacation days when I needed to take off for a speech and never overdid it. But it was an opportunity for me to get to New York, network with as many people as possible, and just kind of have something to supplement my speaking career as I continue to build it. Because even up until this day in 2018, I've only made enough to probably live off of half a year. But it's a combination of passion. And obviously, I want to continue to grow it. But I also think it's important to get in front of as many people as possible to change perceptions. And now I've started to track the people who I've gotten in front of throughout these speeches so I can really come up with some numerical data.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 3.5 years working at the union. I had asked for some promotions after some time there, and it wasn't really playing out. And I had the support. Boss was amazing. I just knew that I needed to go somewhere where I could grow even more after those 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I had met a friend actually right before I moved to New York at a networking event. It was called Work Without Limits, and it promotes disability inclusion in the corporate workplace. And she said, we have a position that may be open. Come to our conference. This was in August of 2016. And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to come speak there? What do you want? She said, just come.
Mm-hmm.
See what it's all about. And at the moment I got there, I knew that that was the environment I wanted to be in, because these corporations are coming together to figure out how they can be more inclusive of people with disabilities in their workplace. And it doesn't feel forced like it does in the entertainment industry.
Oh.
And even with the diversity conversation in the entertainment industry, it continues to be people of color, women, maybe LGBT, disabilities, very far behind. Only like 1% of representation on TV. And I wanted to figure out how I could make change faster and be a part of something bigger than what was going on at the union. And I actually ended up giving my notice the day that the Harvey Weinstein story came out, and the industry went in a whole different direction after that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But so I now work at this organization called Disability, and I manage this index called the Disability Equality Index, and it measures disability inclusion across an enterprise and outward facing if people are trying to attract consumers with disabilities. And it really helps set the infrastructure up. It's a self-assessment that Fortune 1000 companies take, and it sets up the infrastructure so they can feel comfortable and feel proud to be more inclusive of people with disabilities in their workforce.
Wow. What an amazing journey. I mean, we all hear that the entertainment industry is probably one of the hardest industries to break into and to grow through. And, you know, I can certainly see all the challenges with that. But really, your story is around just the tremendous grit and persistence and hard work that you put in to find a lot of those opportunities yourself by building your network and just doing great work and being flexible enough to take temporary assignments and just really try new things you'd never tried before. And I really think anyone can learn from that, you know, no matter what their circumstances are or their backgrounds. And I think that's amazing. And it's just fascinating to see how all the things that you care about in your life can kind of come together as you're getting that experience. So now you can still be a public speaker, you can be an advocate for disabilities, you can work with corporations and other entities to help bring that about. And that's a really amazing evolution.
And the other thing, even lifestyle-wise, I started dating someone long distance in 2016 while I was still in New York. And when I had a job where I was going to the office every day, it was very hard to kind of find that time off in addition to the time off for my speaking. But now I work remotely, and that allowed me to be able to move to be with my now fiance. And it really has changed that personal part of life to find that balance and be able to be where I need to be at any time.
Oh, that's great. You know, there's no traditional like one path to find those things. It's really just trying different things. And then eventually, you know, with all your experience, you know, once you find those opportunities, it can come together. So that's wonderful that you're in a place in your life now where, you know, you've got your needs for family and your needs for career and the things that you're passionate about are all coming together. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's just really focusing on the goal and what you want to accomplish rather than the career path and exactly what jobs you need to have in order to get there. Kind of figuring out, keeping an open mind about different jobs that may be able to help you get there, and trying to make sure that you check in with yourself. And if you're unhappy at your job, because we hear about that often, try to figure out a way to make a shift, and don't worry as much about what other people in your workforce are going to think. If you leave, you got to find your own happiness in order to feel more fulfilled.
Yeah. So as you said, understanding what your goal is and then thinking about, well, how do I get to that goal? What experience do I need to build? And then where can I get that experience? And again, it doesn't, it's not focusing on one career path necessarily. It's just focusing on building those skills and those pieces of experience to put it together into the career that makes you happy.
Right, exactly.
Awesome. So in your public speaking career or in any of the disability advocacy work that you've done, are there any moments that kind of stick in your mind as you think of the people that you've spoken to or spoken with that demonstrates the impact that you've had either on their lives or on the corporation's policies?
As far as speaking goes, especially in the early stages, my mom came to a lot of the speeches and she was telling me stories, just kind of how she saw the audience transformed. I had always dreamed of kind of those moments of someone pointing and staring and laughing the moment they walk into one of my speeches, but really being changed after seeing me speak and just realizing that I'm a human like everyone else. And a lot of times it's just those simple lessons. I would say that some of the questions have been outrageous but amazing. People have asked, do my hair and teeth grow the same? Have I ever considered getting a large dog? Have I ever been attacked by a large dog? Then the younger kids ask if I've been to Florida, because a lot of them may have grandparents who are in Florida. They really just want to kind of find that commonality and get excited when we have that commonality. And then I'd say, as far as corporations go, the corporations that we work with have been amazing and really thinking about different areas of disability. We purposefully, and a lot of what we talk about, keep it vague because we want it to be all inclusive of every disability. But we understand that sometimes you have to advocate for different groups a little differently. And I would say when I'm going into conversations, recently I was speaking at a panel event at Google, and there was a diversity and inclusion panel, and I was there to bring the disability to the conversation. Even when people ask questions, even though I'm there being a part of this diversity discussion, they're still kind of focused on the people of color and women piece. And people aren't as willing to welcome disability into the diversity conversation. And I think it's constantly having to just show up, and hopefully it eventually resonates.
Yeah.
And it's the one group that anyone could be a part of at any point in their life. And I think by sharing these stories and getting more stories out there, hopefully that can reduce any rates of suicide or depression, because they had already been exposed to the community and it could open their eyes in different ways. And I'm not wishing someone having an injury or anything. I'm just saying things happen. And if you embrace the community that you may be a part of someday, it'll go a lot further.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of goals, what goals do you still have for the future? Like, what do you want to achieve that you haven't had a chance to achieve just yet?
I've been dying to go to Australia. I really wanted to study abroad in Australia in college, and that's still very high on my bucket list as far as personal goals. But ideally, it would be to do a speech there, because I could count it as professional goals as well. I want to write a book. I was thinking about having the title be Just Call Me Becky, because people often get caught up on the terminology of what to call us based on our stature. And I'd rather just be called by my name. I know that I want to continue to speak as many places as possible, whether it's through work or personal experiences and asks. I really enjoy the work that I'm doing, and I'm very thankful that I was able to recently get a promotion, and it's the first job where I've actually gotten a promotion.
Awesome.
I would like to see a reduction in the unemployment rate for people with disabilities. I think we have a long way to go, but I think we need to get more people to be open to having the conversation and understanding that people with disabilities, even when we're getting up in the morning, we have so many tasks that we have to accomplish before getting out of the house. And we don't tell anyone about those things.
Right.
And even unless someone asks me about my journey growing up and the medical parts of it, I don't talk about that either as much, because we don't want people to feel bad for us. We just want to have an equal shot at life. And I think it's important for people to also be passionate about the work that they're pursuing. And it's important to give that constructive feedback to people like me, because we're only going to learn to get better by that. And I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more people with disabilities in C-suite positions. And there may even be, because 75% of disabilities are invisible. But if we could get more people to share their story and their connection to disability, I think the world would be a better place, because it really isn't a scary word and should just be a characteristic of someone that makes them a stronger person.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you said before, is you need to see it to be it. So just understanding those examples are out there.
So I think just really making sure the next generation feels taken care of and that they have any opportunity they may want to pursue. I want to continue to see that and be that resource.
Wonderful. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more about your speaking and all your work?
My website is beckymotivates.com, BECKYMOTIVATES.com. And through that, you can see my speaker Facebook page, my YouTube channel, my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my Pinterest, and videos and parts of my story all there.
Fantastic. Well, Becky, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. Really enjoyed learning much more about your story and all of the amazing work that you're doing in the disability community. As we close out, is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know, or anything that can help or support you with?
I would just say embrace differences and be curious. Don't make assumptions and ask questions.
Perfect. Thanks again. Really enjoyed having you on the show. Thanks for listening to Beyond 6 Seconds. Please help us spread the word about this podcast. Share it with a friend, give us a shout out on your social media, or write a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. You can find all of our episodes on our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.